Welcome everyone to the podcast. Today I have a very special guest and he goes by the name of Daniel Westerheim. He has won multiple awards for the fastest growing businesses in the United States and has had multiple seven-figure exits. We're going to dive into a lot of topics here today, varying from business consulting advice to young entrepreneur advice. So I'm very, very excited. Thank you for being here with me, Daniel.
My pleasure.
Yes, sir. I really, really appreciate you for stopping by. I know you could get busy at times, but it's something I really, really appreciate, man.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's kick things off. I wanted to ask, tell me, seven-figure exits. You don't hear that often. I think that's what I mentioned to you when I first met you. I was like, seven-figure exits. Like, I think it's 1% out of 1% of any business gets sold, from what I've seen. So how did you have multiple? Tell me about your first experience, the first business.
The first exit would have been probably my largest one as a hydrogen fuel cell components company, and it exited to my employee, actually the first employee that I hired.
Oh, really?
So he was a young kid. So I want to say when I exited, he was like maybe 25, 27. So
Really?
Probably the youngest millionaire in town. But
how did that go about? Especially why an employee? How does that work?
Well, at that point, we were growing a lot. We were trucking along, growing, and the company was doing great. I was starting to spend more time looking at other ventures and doing more mergers, acquisitions for that company. The kid, my employee, the guy that I hired fresh out of college a few years before that, was running all of the daily operations. He had a very entrepreneurial mindset.
I love that.
He was starting to get to the point where he was like, okay, I could tell he was looking to maybe start his own or to, wanted to be more involved in the ownership aspect of it. And so I had a decision to make. Do I want to stay here knowing that in a year, maybe two, however long, there was a good chance that I would have to either step back into the role of daily operations or hire someone to replace him, and or I could sell to him and walk away with a bit of a cash and essentially retire at that point. And so I kind of weighed my options a little bit, and the walking away with the money and selling it to him accomplished a number of personal goals, and seemed the best fit. I just didn't have an interest in going back into the daily operations grind.
That's great that you were able to spot that so easily, because you knew, I'm like, okay, this kid's eventually going to leave someday if this is the mindset he has.
Yeah.
So you were like, I think it's just better to give the business to him.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it certainly wasn't giving, but
for sure.
but we did coordinate it, and it took a long time to get through. Of course, even with financing and all that. Again, he's a fairly young kid without a whole lot of history or anything. When you're doing a seven-figure buy, it took a bit of a legwork, and so we got it all done.
How were you able to find him? Did he find you, or how did that hiring process even go down where he was hired?
Yeah, that hiring process is like almost everything, is a friend of a friend, right? So it's who you know, and it's what you go. And I think I'd actually worked at a charity event here in town called Lemonade Day. So I was on the board of Lemonade Day here in town earlier on, and his girlfriend at the time was there, worked there, and between her and the coordinator of the program, we're like, oh, I'm looking for someone, and they said, this person is good. So I brought him in, interviewed him, and then hired him, and did just a terrible job at hiring him. Because he came in and I complained about him for at least 6 months because he didn't do what he was supposed to do. And it took me a little while to figure out. I had just hired him in the wrong role.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I hired him thinking he was going to be a salesman and to be like essentially cold calling. Like we were in a technical field, so having him go through like all the research papers and emailing all the authors on the research papers, and just like numbers game, right? Just like contact all the time, sales. Yeah. And that wasn't him. As we were working more and more with him, and I'd started working him and guiding him through how to build some spreadsheets and things like that. And it was like, okay, well, this guy is actually an operator and a buyer. He's a really fantastic buyer to getting good deals and negotiating.
Oh, really?
So eventually I figured out that he wasn't the salesman.
Uh-huh.
And so I just took the sales part away from him and started pushing him more towards all the operations. And he just continued to grow in that. And that's where he excelled and where he still excels. And that company's still doing fantastic.
That's amazing.
People always ask me, are you disappointed that you sold it? And, I was like, no, I always knew it was going to do well. This just fit a good move for me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
were you able to learn a lesson from that? That being, hey, now I kind of understand not everyone has a specific role they're going to play. So you were kind of were you able to identify how people have their own roles? Not everyone can be a salesperson. Not everyone can be this. And so did you find out what the characteristics are?
I mean, kind of knew that everybody wasn't doing well, and one of my weaknesses is probably identifying or actually dealing with the people end of things, right?
Oh.
So it's a little bit harder for me sometimes. The HR aspect, all of that. I'm an engineer by background, so I'm kind of a very data-driven,
numbers guy.
Not a whole lot of personality there, I don't think, with me, but. Being able to recognize it and is something that had to be learned. And for me personally, I kind of always say one of the most important hires that you can hire is your HR person. So whoever is hiring for you, those are the people that build the excellent teams and are able to help you fill the gaps that you need and find the people that have the right mentality to fit with your organization or your goals.
Yeah.
We never had technically like a HR hiring person, but
but you learned, right?
Yeah, we learned. And I very quickly pushed the hiring off to anyone else who was better job. I always trusted everybody when they came in. They're like, oh yeah, I'm an Excel genius, and then you give them like an Excel test. It's like a sum of these columns, and they didn't know how to do it. But I always believed that they were the genius. So.
Yeah. So I have seen multiple people who are very successful entrepreneurs have started off from engineer background. I don't know why that is. I think it might just be the numbers. And so do you have a personal take on that? On why
I would guess that that's what it is. It's a numbers and fact-based management, right? So, directing where are you going to spend your money, and it's the engineers are trained and forced into like benefit analysis, right? So you're going look and say, okay, if I put X amount of money in this column, is it going to return, or should I spend money on print advertising or social media, or do I need to not bother with that at all and spend my money on improving processes? And actually, that might be another reason, is that I think engineers would tend to focus more towards the processes and all of that, which
like
I
the
think
systems and everything,
right, to make the business better and focus a little bit less on the advertising nature of it, because I think engineer guy, so of course I'm going to agree with myself, but I think that might be a little bit better approach, because I have basically two rules on how to build a growing business. And, it's very, very simple, right? One of them is make it easy for your customer. And the second one is make sure your income is bigger than your expense. And,
super simple principles people forget to follow.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. If what you're doing is not helping one of those two columns, then you probably need to seriously consider whether that's the highest priority thing for you to do right then. And that doesn't necessarily, marketing isn't really like called out on that. How you help your customer, making it easy for your customers, that can be anything from marketing to how do they find you, but even more so, is it faster delivery times or lower prices or more technical support? And you'd probably be surprised at how often the pricing is not
a factor
at the top of the list. It's further down than you would expect, because if you can deliver a product when they want it, quickly, efficiently, and they don't have to worry about it, then they're less concerned about pricing.
For example, one of the biggest companies in the world, Amazon.
And they're focused on very much a similar.
And it's more like, hey, we'll get it to you in 2 days, or sometimes even at times you get it that same day. And so I've realized that people would much rather pay a higher price for delivery, for time.
Yeah. Well, and some of this came from several years before I started the business. I was doing research and development, and I'd called up a company looking. I wanted them to make a custom gas sampling bag, just basically a Ziploc, but it had to be certain material and a certain valve on it. And I needed like 5 of these things. It wasn't like I was calling for a giant order or anything. So I called up this company. So I need such and such dimensions in this valve, yada yada. And they said, okay, yeah, no problem. And so I was like, okay, 5 of them, that's $130 a piece or something like that.
Yeah.
So I did that. I said, yeah, it'll be, no problem. So I hung out. And then like later, a couple hours later, I realized, oh, you know what? I need a different valve or something. So I went back, and this is just a few hours later. Like I ordered at 10 a.m. and I called them after lunch. And hey, I just placed an order. I need to change. Yeah, it's like I need to change the valve or change something. So I said, oh, well, we already shipped that. And then I hung up the phone, and I had 2 thoughts. And one of them was, holy crap, those people are good. I'm never calling anyone else for a bag again. And I went, well, I just decided never to price shop or look at another vendor based off of that one experience. That's probably important. And then, years later, when I started working with my own customers instead of being a researcher, I was developing things. I tried to really put that mindset to use that if you can be so good that when they hang up the phone, they go, I'm never calling anyone else again, then you've won. I mean, that's really what you want to get to for customer service, is that it's not even a consideration. It's not just top of mind awareness. It's you are the only one in their mind.
Yeah, they're like,
because of operational excellence. Because you did whatever it is so good that they don't have to even worry or think about it. Because no one wants to worry and think about stuff.
No. I mean, the main point of an entrepreneur is that you're solving someone else's problem, and you want it to be as easy and as frictionless as possible. Hey, I call you. Okay, I need this. Boom, perfect. I know it's getting done. Right.
If they never have to follow up with you, then I mean, that's a goal. They should never have a customer call you back asking you something. Right. The whole goal is to try to not ever make a customer ever have to call you to check on the status, to check on where it is, or anything. You do. When they place the order, the next thing they should hear is, the doorbell ringing with their,
like, hey, it's
whatever
here.
It is, or the service, or what have you. Or someone calling up saying, hey, we got it done early. Do you want it early, or do you want us to hold on to it for you?
And I feel like that's also a big principle according to that, which is lower, what is it? I lost it. But it's
undercutting pricing?
No, it's say you're gonna do something at a specific time frame and do it half the time, and then people are like, holy crap, that's when they're impressed, right? It's
under promise and over delivery.
Yes, that's what it is. Oh geez, man, I was having an issue with that.
But
But have you, as an entrepreneur who's had multiple 7-figure exits, do you have any specific entrepreneurs that you look up to? Let's say Elon Musk or Bill Gates, outside of like the politics, just off the straight systems that they work with. Do you have anybody in mind?
I've actually haven't delved into a whole lot of people that closely.
Really?
Honestly. And I don't read a whole lot of business books. I enjoy the few that I do, but it's just, another story sort of related to that. I used to get these big fat catalogs of all the, of just equipment and tools and things and all that stuff, and I'd flip through them, look through them, and my office mate at the time was like, why are you doing this? Like, well, I don't know, in case I need it. It's like, I don't even look at any of that stuff until I actually need it, so you're just wasting time looking through all of it. And I kind of took the same, I guess the same approach with those business books, is that unless there's a specific problem that I need to go out and solve in the business, I don't need to. And I know there's a ton of knowledge I've missed out on, and reading them for enjoyment is a different thing. But if you're spending, 80 hours a week reading business books in order to run your business, how much could you get done with your 80 hours if you put that into your business and made a few false steps along the way?
Experience is the biggest teacher.
Yeah. And your business is going to be different than anybody else's business. Your vision is going to be slightly different from somebody else's vision, and so they're good tools and they're interesting. They're fun.
They're fun to read. I love them.
They're fun to do. I mean, I would absolutely, and I'm not advocating not educating yourself or reading or doing any of that.
Uh-huh.
It's always, I guess, when I was running my businesses, I didn't have time to learn about running a business. I just
You just started. You're just like,
random,
okay,
yeah,
what am
yeah.
I? What do I do here?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's like, what's the next thing? And that was a big deal too. Is
Uh-huh.
what is the one thing that's stopping you from doing whatever's next?
Uh-huh.
Um,
And so I actually ended up learning that when I was younger in high school. When I was a sophomore, we ended up having this PE class, and it was a weird PE class. They had us doing work instead of working out or something. But one of the questions they had asked is, oh, how do you learn more? How are you able to do a specific thing? Is it by learning about it or by doing it? By experience or by educating yourself about it? And so I was like, oh, educating yourself about it. If I learned all the fundamentals of boxing, if I step into that ring, I'm going to knock someone out, is what I thought. But in reality, it's experience.
Mhm.
And so let's say you know all of the fundamentals of boxing, and then this guy has boxed for a good amount of time. He's learned that already just by doing it. And so you're over here a noob. Next thing you know, you start fighting, boom, he knocks you out.
Yeah.
And so I've always seen throughout that period, I later on, like a year later, I'm like, oh snap. I always think about that. Come to find out that experience is the biggest teacher.
Yeah.
And so you could read about a certain topic all you want, but if you don't start it, then it's not really going to mean a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So that's what worked for me.
Uh-huh.
And
Which makes
again,
sense.
I'm not saying advocating not reading. I love to read. I read
Educate yourself
all the time, but don't forget to actually work in the business too.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And work intentionally. Pay attention to what is working and what's failing and what could be improved. Particularly, like I mentioned a second ago, focusing on the one thing is keeping you from accomplishing the next thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you're early in the business and you need customers, what is one thing that's keeping you from getting customers? It's probably just calling people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting your name out there, whatever you want to call it. It's you got to get the customer to call
Marketing
you.
aspect.
Yeah. So do you need to have a fancy accounting system set up to do that? No. I mean, when you're looking for your first client, you don't need really much of any back end information. You can do everything with Post-it notes and whatever, and it's ugly and it's inefficient, but it gets you you spend your time getting your customer. Once you get your customer, you need to work on that. And so, my fuel cell company, that was one of the things that we initially started with when I took it over. It took about 4 weeks to generate a quote, a couple of weeks to generate a quote, because every time someone called up, I'd have to go around and ask all the scientists, can we make this? How do we make this? And then I'd have to call up all the vendors because we kept no inventory. How much is this material? How much is that material? How long is it going to take? So you had to do all this digging to come up with a quote for 5 pieces that are $130 a piece. Something like that. So one of the first things I did was I put a lot, and it was in Excel. So I started putting all that into Excel. And so then it went down to, I could do a quote in a week because I just needed to check like spot times on delivery orders and stuff like that. So then production became the bottleneck, right? Because because it took 6 to 8 weeks to make the product initially. So, okay, well, now we're going to deal with, maybe we're going to hold a little bit more inventory of the stuff that we know we're going to do. So when this guy orders this batch, we're going to order twice as much material so that next time I don't have to call and find out if our vendor has any material because I have enough for this next small job in hand. And then, so that shortened up, and then the quote sheet became the bottleneck. So then I went back to the quote sheet, the quoting process, and continued to refine that. And then by the end of the thing, I could give quotes basically instantly. I actually ended up building an online tool to give quotes for custom products online.
Oh, really?
For custom technical product. And then for a lot of the products, for a custom-made low volume product, we could get it out in the same day or the next day.
And that's where you make stuff easier for the client.
Yeah, so we made stuff easier for the client. Yeah, so we went from having, for the same product that would take, was that 3 months to get to the customer, we're now doing in 2 days from start to finish. Or same day sometimes.
Yeah.
They would call up and we go, all right, because we just keep whittling away at the one thing that was keeping us from doing it. And sometimes it is the back end stuff. It's like, okay, well, we're slow because our accounting process is Post-it notes still. So if that's what's slowing you down, you got to move away from the Post-it notes.
And you say you figure these problems out through time.
Yeah. You just, I mean, as you're working in the business, right? Someone calls you up and he gives you you know how long it takes before you can call them back or send them a quote back and say, oh, this is how much it's going to be. And if it's, you can tell when you can get that shorter, and what is holding you back, what is keeping you from getting that quote sooner. Is it a particular vendor whose price is always changing? Well, can you call up the vendor and say, hey, can we get some fixed pricing, or I'll enter a contract that we're going to have, this is going to be the price for the next,
or do I have to go to another vendor?
Yeah, or do I have to go to another vendor? Can I find another one? Or can I just buy a batch of inventory so I know my costing of that batch, right? So it's like, okay, I know how much that's going to be, so I'm going to put that in, or I know it's going to be within this range. I mean, you just find out what's keeping you from taking so long, and make it not take so long.
Yeah. So through your experience, also by helping out other businesses as a business consultant, would you say there's a lot of times businesses focus on the wrong things?
I think everybody will oftentimes focus on the wrong thing, because you're never going to know what the right thing is.
Yeah.
So if you do try to take a step and say and ask yourself, what value is this time or money providing back to the company? It works better if you do that before you started, if you can, right? Drop 10 or 100 grand on some project, and then find out that it gave you a 5% return, where you could put it, if you put 100 grand into something else, it'd make you a 50 or 100% return.
Yeah. Like for example, I feel like when I started, when I was like, I'm in my industry, finance, let's go. The main thing, I was like, okay, now that I have a business, I'm going to start my website. And then as I start my website, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then once I got all that, then I'm like, oh man, this is great. Why am I not getting no customers? And so the main thing would have been like, learn how to get customers. From what I've learn how to get customers, find something you're getting customers from, and then kind of build all that back end work. Yeah, it's from my personal experience. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wasted so much time on that now that I look back on it. Yeah. But that's just something I try to pass down to new people.
Sure. And it's absolutely right. And I've been putting all these in context of manufacturing, because that's my nature. I've been in manufacturing since I was a kid. But it works in service industries too, or financial industries, any of that. It's the same process, the same thought process. So like in your case, you're probably best building a landing page just so you got somewhere to send someone, and then spending your time reaching out, figuring out how to get people, how to get people in, and
it's just the marketing aspect of it.
The
top of funnel.
We'll
say the top of funnel. Right.
Oh, I drew up a little thing one day for someone, and the whole sell.
So we ended up having a bit of technical issues right now, so we're gonna get back to it. If we need a sponsor who's gonna sponsor this podcast and get me a new camera, because this iPhone, my old iPhone, isn't cutting it anymore. But
so this is the limiting factor for you, which keeping you from doing the next.
We need a sponsor. Someone, I'm more than happy to sponsor you out. But going back to it, you were mentioning about your sales funnel.
Right. So the sales funnel. So I thought of this a little while back. So interesting on the sales funnel. So the width of the top of the funnel is defined is a reflection of the effectiveness of your sales and marketing strategy. Right.
Correct.
And then so you have how big the funnel is down at the bottom, how many leads you actually get out. The slope of that funnel, the angle of the funnel is dictated by your operations, right? So if you have really good marketing, your funnel's huge at the top, but you have really crappy operations, no one's coming out the bottom of it, because you can't get them quotes, you can't get them product, there's no recirculation loop on your, no repeat buyers, none of that. So your funnel is tiny at the bottom. If you have really excellent operations and poor marketing, then your funnel is smaller at the top, and you have a bigger opening. So you want you want it to be a straight line, or a little bit of just a smaller slope, right? So you've got most of the people coming into your marketing are coming out as customers at the bottom of the funnel. Yeah. So that's where you get that whole bouncing back and forth. It doesn't do any good to generate more kick-ass marketing if you're just
You lost them by the second step.
yeah. If you've lost them, if your funnel is so steep because you're spending all this money up here, it's almost guaranteed that if you spent some money on your operations and you wind out that funnel a little bit, you'd have better utilization of your sales and marketing dollars than if you put more sales and marketing dollars in. So I don't know, that was my
So you were referencing a picture. Are you able to pull it up by any chance?
And yeah, it was a hand-drawn picture.
Oh, it was a hand-drawn picture?
I mean, it was a hand-drawn on a deal, so let's see if I can pull that up.
But
I don't know.
Yeah, you can just show it to the camera.
Is it show up there?
Yeah. And so can you touch on those pictures real quick? Well, what exactly was it? I see 3 different funnels.
Yeah, so that was basically what I just explained. So your typical funnel is, is your sales and marketing is the top, and then the slope is the slope of the funnel is the operations. And then I had an example of good marketing and bad operations with the small funnel, and then okay marketing and good and great operations has the big opening at the bottom and only a slightly bigger funnel at the top.
So yeah, we weren't able to dive into all the big 7-figure exits you've had, but can you name off the industries? That's okay.
Yeah, so I've had just a couple. So a couple of the 7 figures. So the first one was the hydrogen fuel cell components business. So it was a global company that we ended up selling, and then the other one was a internet retail e-commerce retail sales based primarily with Amazon. So it was Amazon FBA business. We manufactured products in China, had them shipped here and fulfilled primarily marketed and fulfilled primarily through Amazon. That one was a little bit smaller, still 7 figures, but still a smaller deal. When we listed that with the broker, we broke their system because we had too many people putting down deposits to buy it, so we had to close the listing after the first week.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it was a good problem. So I spent at least a week or more, solid like 40-hour weeks, doing nothing but interviewing buyers. These huge billion-dollar funds that were acquiring Amazon-based businesses.
And so what inspired that? You were like, okay, I think I'm going to sell this off.
That was part of one of the selling it off.
Yeah.
So I was working with my brother on that one. He handled a good portion of the daily operations, and this was actually in COVID. I sold it during COVID.
Yeah. Okay.
But
no wonder it was so big. Yeah.
Yeah. It was doing good, and it was pre-COVID. It was still growing. What did we do? We tripled the profit or something, I think, in the first couple of years.
That's great. Yeah.
Again, listening to my employees on it, and I had a decision point there. I mean, my brother kept doing it, but he's always concerned about like the things that Amazon would do, their metrics and all of this, and it's inventory heavy to grow properly. You're constantly buying inventory and more inventory.
I'm sure it takes a lot of time and research, especially if they change one policy. One policy could switch over everything. Yeah, essentially, they're basically your bosses.
Right, and we were fine. Everything was truck on. There was absolutely no problems with it at all. But I could tell he was just getting nervous about it, and I was like, I don't want to burn him out because it was almost like a side gig for him. That was the nice thing about the Amazon business. It was relatively low utilization from either of us. I think he was just getting a little nervous.
Shaking?
Yeah, just a little nervous about it. And so I was like, okay, well, we'll sell it and move on to the next one.
And so after the Amazon, what was the next one? This is all between how long time frame? 10, 20 years, you would say?
No, I rolled out the fuel cell business. I started that the day that my oldest child was born, my oldest girl, so in 2011, and I sold that one in just before COVID, 2019-ish, I guess. About 8 years. The Amazon one, I bought 2 businesses on the same day. One of them was an Amazon, the other one was a brick and mortar bakery. And that one I held for right around 3 years and
Uh-huh.
sold it in 21,
Jeez.
something like that. 22.
Uh-huh.
Oh, what is this? Yeah,
We're in
something around
25
there.
now.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh man.
probably 21, 22.
And so, how were I'm sure every business has bad moments, bad seasons. How were you able to control the bad seasons? Did it play like a mental toll on you, or
Yeah.
you were just like,
No,
whatever the numbers say, I'm gonna just stick to the numbers? I'm not
yeah, we
listening.
stick to the numbers. And when we were going that fast, everybody used to ask me in the fuel cell industry, like, oh, because we went through a couple of cycles where some presidents and some policies were very pro hydrogen and some of them were very not. And,
Yeah,
so the people would always say, hey, how does this, I bet you guys are hurting. It's like we were always growing so fast and
it
so
didn't impact
much,
us.
it didn't impact us. Now the company is probably big enough where they might actually be a bit of a market driver themselves.
Oh man, that's great.
But as we're running through all of this, we were supplying those people,
Uh-huh.
and I guess our funnel was always large enough, and our operations are always fast enough
Yeah.
that we kept getting more and more efficient and lower cost basis, and our customers continued to grow. We
Mhm.
saw a little bit of shift in who the customers were. It
Mhm.
might go from being a automotive company doing hydrogen fuel cells
Uh-huh.
to a company doing CO2 recapture with a slightly different technology that still was
Mhm.
fell in our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But we didn't care. We were making whatever the customer needed to within our realm of expertise.
As fast as possible.
Yep, as fast, well, and as possible. And I passed a lot of those costs on.
Uh-huh.
Um, so
Yeah.
I don't think I ever lost by telling a customer of a cheaper way they could do it. Right.
Mhm.
So they come in asking for something that I felt was made us more money.
Yeah.
They'd come asking for something that was a $2,000 part, and I said,
Uh-huh.
I'd find out what they're working on, and they go, you can do that with like this $100 one over here.
Yeah.
And sometimes they would take it. Sometimes no, I want this one over here. Okay,
Okay,
I'll
man.
deliver whatever you want.
Oh,
But
whatever you want, man.
yeah,
We got it.
yeah,
We got it.
yeah. I talked to them about, okay, well, if you change the size a little bit, I get better utilization on materials, so
Uh-huh.
you can get basically, you'll get these
Mhm.
5 parts for free,
Yeah.
basically because of our, if you're doing
And so
utilization.
now let's dive into the topic of advice for young entrepreneurs specifically. What would be the first step you would tell someone who has a struggling business or wants to start out a business, wants to start a business? Hey, I want to do it.
Yeah.
What would be the first thing they should do?
I don't know. I was trying to come up with something good. I
Yeah.
was thinking of good traits for entrepreneurs to
Okay.
have, and I
Yeah.
think one of them might, or two of them, that at first sound contradictory. I'd say be very self-aware of your limit of your skill sets. Where the holes are. And the other one being be fairly confident
Mm-hmm.
in fact that you got to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to fail, or be confident that you can acquire at least enough expertise to do it yourself. Because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people end up hiring out a lot of things because they're scared of it or they feel they're not an expert in it. Become enough of an expert in it to do it and get it done and get it knocked out and gone without having to pay, somebody, a whole bunch of money. Accounting is always a good example. Everybody wants to outsource accounting. So,
Well, yeah. Back to it. I did want to ask, give us the main tips young entrepreneurs should know. They'd be like, hey, for example, it's not, you can't just build a 7-figure business in a short amount of time. For example, that one. It takes time to build that.
Yeah.
Right. So what are some principles you would give out?
I'd say persistence.
Persistence?
Yeah. I mean, it took to negotiate because I bought the first business out of another company. It took me, I think, a little over a year to negotiate that thing. And then I bought a number of companies from around the world to roll into that one.
Yeah.
And you think it's going to take a month, and they take 6 months, 9 months for each one of those. So persistence and sticking to it, and like I said, learning something, right? If you're trying to learn your accounting, you gotta kind of stick with it until you get enough of it learned to move to the next problem.
Yeah. Okay. Persistence, that would be a big one that I've seen. Another one, do you have another one by any chance?
Patience, persistence, and
Patience.
patience kind of go hand
Okay.
in hand, right? So,
Yeah.
like we were talking about, you know, assume that it's going to be a 10-year process for you to build your business. Now, you may be able to do it faster, and it depends on where you're trying to go with it. But just assume that it's going to be 10 years before you know you reach a point where you can
Yeah.
say,
Think in the long term.
yeah,
Think in the long term. Everything in the long term.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's not going to be a get rich quick scheme.
Yeah.
It doesn't really happen, particularly if you're starting from zero. It's
Yeah.
I've never done that.
Any closing thoughts you would like to give the audience in general?
I can't think of anything. I mean, stick
Just
with it. The rewards are there if you do it properly.
that's good. I've never heard that one. Yeah.
And but you have to be realistic on what your expectations are, because especially if you're starting, you are the person doing everything, including the things that you're not good at. So work your way through it and just keep doing the thing that's keeping you from going forward.
Yeah.
And
Well,
get done.
we're gonna wrap things up because Daniel does have to start heading somewhere else. He has another meeting. All for it. But thank you very much, Daniel, for coming on and giving out your expertise as much as you can during this small period. But I really appreciate it, man. Thank you, Daniel.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it.
Yes, sir. All right.
Thank you.
Take care.